Welcome to the video, guys. So, Boris Johnson might be ready to take us out of the EU with no deal by the end of the year, even starting the planning in June for such an act, meaning there would be no more trade negotiations after June and we would be leaving on WTO terms in December, with the usual remoaning going on and Brexiteer supporting papers celebrating it as you would expect, which we will actually take a look at a couple of articles relating to it in a moment. But first we need to deal with a concern that this will bring forward, which is of course Tory party MPs doing what they did in the 2017 to 2019 Parliament when they either defected to other parties or voted against the government in important votes on Brexit. As you will remember, 21 Tory MPs were kicked out of the party when they voted against him in the Houses of Parliament last year. But last night we had Tobias Ellwood on the Andrew Neil Show, discussing a range of topics from defence to Brexit, which is a part we are going to look at, as that is all that really matters for this video. But during his discussion with Andrew Neil, he said him and a group of other Tory MPs would be willing to go against Boris Johnson to prevent no deal, meaning it's very possible we could see a similar situation to last time. Hopefully, with an 80-seat majority, Boris Johnson will still have the numbers to be able to prevent any of these remoaning tosspots from stopping us leaving the EU this year. So first, let's take a look at a clip from the Andrew Neil Show yesterday, and then like I said, we'll go over what's been happening this morning, with Boris Johnson saying he will rip up the political declaration and leave on no deal.
If the government refuses a trade deal with the EU because Brussels demands we remain aligned to EU rules, would you try to block that no deal?
I'm not going to hypothecate where things are going to go now.
Well, it could happen. There's a 50-50 chance.
I think the actual negotiations begin tomorrow. It is going to be tough, and the time frame is going to be tight indeed.
No, I know all that, but would you try to block leaving with no trade deal?
No, I don't believe we're not going to have a trade deal. That's been made sense. In fact, the no-deal scenario planning from the MOD and Number 10 has actually been dropped. There's not even a contingency plan now because there's a determination to get a trade deal.
Yeah, but if we don't?
Then you're left with no deal. And like I said,
And would you oppose that? That's my question. It's quite a simple question.
I'm saying it's not a scenario that's even to be entertained, and therefore there's no requirement to give it even ask me the question.
Hold on, it's a scenario that the government knows could well happen.
No, it couldn't. Not because there will be a form of trade deal, or one form. It might be a freer, looser trade deal than might have originally been anticipated.
We have seen the Prime Minister. We've seen David Frost, who's leading the negotiations for Mr Johnson. We've seen them make clear there are certain things which, unless the EU backs down, they will not agree to a deal. And yet you, who were so against no deal 12 months ago, are not now prepared to say you're going to fight to stop no deal this time.
I will, absolutely. There'll be many of us that will fight to stop no deal. The point, though, is that the threat of no deal is not the same as it was before. We came very, very close to actually going over that cliff edge, and thankfully that's been avoided. And I think the nation recognises that as well, given the result of the last general election.
Well, you can see there a definite snake in the grass, and there likely is a few others with him. How many? We don't know. But you heard him say it there. I will work to stop a no-deal Brexit, and so will others. Like I said though, hopefully they won't actually have enough people to do this. But that interview there clearly shows this arsehole is told absolutely nothing, because he's still sitting there thinking no deal planning isn't happening. Which, by the sounds of what we're going to read in a moment, it actually is. And I'm pretty sure Boris Johnson said no deal planning is still going on. If it wasn't Boris Johnson, it was something else. But the Independent are reporting on this morning, Boris Johnson claims UK prepared to leave the EU with no deal at the end of the year, document reveals. Both sides playing tough ahead of opening of formal negotiations on Monday. Boris Johnson is ready to walk away from Brexit trade talks and prepared the UK to leave the EU without a deal at the end of the year if sufficient progress is not made by June, according to a new document setting out the government's stance for negotiations. Which, if true, is a good thing, not only because it brings back the possibility of a no-deal Brexit, but it also forces the EU to give us a better deal if a deal is going to be done. The negotiating mandate revived fears of a no-deal crash-out with tariffs and other trade barriers on imports and exports and likely disruption to ports and airports from the 1st of January next year. Bullshit! We already know there is not going to be disruption at ports and airports. This has already been stated many times over. I'm sick of saying it. And as for the trade barriers and tariffs, they will soon drop them once businesses in the EU are lobbying Brussels because they can't get the shit they need to make the products they want to sell to European citizens, and in some cases to us. It set the scene for a Brexit bust-up when talks on the future UK-EU relationship open in Brussels on Monday, with Britain insistent it will not sign up to follow European rules and regulations. It's not that Britain's insistent, it's that the government has no choice. If they do, they will be considered sellouts and traitors, and we will be after them, just like we was the Labour Party and Lib Dems for trying to block the democratic wishes of this country. Naturally, Labour accused Mr Johnson of showing a cavalier disregard for the consequences on people's livelihoods, while the TUC said he was recklessly endangering working people's jobs and rights. Who actually gives a fuck what the TUC has got to say? And let's be honest about Labour and people's livelihoods. Their election manifesto would have destroyed people's livelihoods for decades to come when they bankrupted the country. So, seems a bit hypocritical for them to be talking about anyone with a cavalier disregard for the consequences of people's lives. Both sides are playing tough as talks commence, with EU chief negotiator Michel Barnier warning on Tuesday that Brussels will not accept a deal at any price if it suspects the UK of planning to cut corners on standards and subsidies to gain an unfair commercial advantage. Let's see what Andrew Neil had to say about the EU's negotiating position, because Barnier gave a speech to his former university yesterday, where it seems the EU's red lines are actually not that set in stone and they'll be willing to backtrack if possible.
And when you look at the EU position, it's not quite as dramatic as lots of people think. The first exhibit is a speech that Michel Barnier, the chief negotiator, he is staying after all, gave today to his old business school here in Brussels. He said things like, "We understand the UK wants its own rule book." Okay, so the UK is not going to be a rule taker. "I don't believe the UK will become some sort of Singapore on Thames." Okay, some divergence from EU rules might be okay after all. And finally, we're asking that the UK and the EU lay down together a number of rules building on our current high standards in specific areas. Okay, maybe the two sides could be sovereign equals. Now, isn't that just what the UK is asking for? Not to be a rule taker, to have the power to diverge and to be treated as a sovereign equal. And if you want to read the mandate in real detail that was published this week, it's 46 pages long. There are a few other clues about some areas of flex there as well.
Adam, that's fascinating. Thank you for that. Thanks for bringing us up to date there.
See, as you heard then, they ain't so strong on what they're thinking it would seem. And with Boris's new stance, we actually stand a good chance of putting them in their place. Because, remember guys, they need us a hell of a lot more than we actually need them. So I don't know what the Independent are on about with both sides playing tough. Because the UK, it seems, might be playing tough, but the EU don't really have the cards in their hand to talk the shit necessary to get them anywhere in the future. Boris and an 80-seat majority gives him all the cards in his hands to deal with the EU when it comes to Brexit and the EU trade negotiation. London accuses Brussels of trying to inflate the scope of an agreement signed by the Prime Minister in October, which committed both sides to maintaining a level playing field on environmental protections, workers' rights, health and safety rules, state aid and taxation. Which is now why Boris Johnson is saying he will tear up the political declaration, because the EU are making all kinds of demands that we've heard over the last few weeks that was not part of said political declaration. So if they can tear it up, Boris Johnson can tear it up as well, and we can go no deal if he's got the bollocks. Let me tell ya, that's always a big if. The new document sets out the UK's ambition for a Canada-style comprehensive free trade agreement, which officials admit will mean extra red tape and controls for businesses and travellers at ports and airports. Yeah, it means you will have to do what you do for other countries. But as for the ports and goods coming in, we already know most of that is done in 5 minutes, with the rest of it usually being done in 2 hours. Something I have reported on many times, debunking the Project Fear bullshit we've heard multiple times. The new document also rejects the EU's insistence that an agreement along the lines of Canada's CETA, which provides for zero tariffs on many goods, is not on offer to the UK because of its geographical and economic closeness. In other words, protectionist state trying to protect itself from any form of competition. Bunch of snivelling shitweasel. But it also insists that Mr. Johnson is ready to leave on World Trade Organization terms, effectively paving the way for a no-deal Brexit. Preparations for withdrawal with no trade deal, including new infrastructure at ports and the recruitment of new border staff, will not wait until talks collapse, but begin straight away. Therefore, debunking everything Tobias Ellwood said in that clip I showed you earlier. So I would say get ready for the possibility of a bunch of traitors on the Tory side. It says Mr. Johnson's government hopes the broad outlines of an FTA can be ready for rapid finalisation by September. But it adds, if it does not seem to be the case at the June meeting, the government will need to decide whether the UK's attention should move away from negotiations and focus solely on continuing domestic preparations to exit the transition period in an orderly fashion. The UK will make its decision on the basis of whether good progress has been possible on the least controversial parts of negotiation by that point. Of course, we heard about Labour saying about a cavalier disregard. We know what their nonsense is. Gove responded to that, and yet the rest of it just seems to be a complete load of old bollocks. The usual Ramonas Ramoning, nothing new there. Francis O'Grady from the TUC being one of them. Fuck off, love, we're leaving, suck it up, you lost. But if Boris Johnson really has got the balls to do this, it could be a good thing. Now he just needs to release the Pakistani rape gang report, because just getting Brexit done isn't enough. But on that note, guys, I am going to end the video there. Now before I go, I've started doing live streams and uploading gaming content on my second channel. If you would like to come and join me for a live stream to chat in real time, have an interest in gaming related content on YouTube, or just want to follow me over there because you are a legend, the link will be down in the video description below and as a pinned comment. I hope to see you all there. Now as always, before I go, I want to thank our PayPal, Patreon, Subscribestar and YouTube members for supporting the channel, along with everyone who watches my videos. Remember to let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Leave a like, subscribe with the notification bell and share this video as it helps the channel a lot, and I will see you all in the next one.
There is a pattern consistent throughout history of oppressed people turning on the oppressors, slaves against their owners, the peasantry against the feudal barons, colonies, Mr. Verhofstadt, against their empires, and that is why Britain is leaving. And it doesn't matter which language you use, we are going, and we are glad to be going. We're off.